Hello, test. Hello, test. Well, good evening. Okay, this screen is live control room. I don't know what that is. I guess I should look into that. Hi, Kate's Biz. How are you? Howdy. So I put this old screen that I had up there, kind of by accident, and realized that this is a picture of the last two. I mean, the last eclipse, the total solar eclipse that we had. And that's the one that's marked August 21st, 2017. And then the date of the next eclipse, total solar eclipse like that, is going to be April 8th, 2024. So we've got an approximate 7 years. I don't think that's accidental. Like when Jesus said that you would see the signs in the sun and the moon and the stars, I think he was referring to this time period right now, but all the time periods. I mean, when T&O came. So extending to now, where now is where it's going to be talked about the most because they left. They didn't. That crew didn't need that experience to be drawn to T&O's material because they had the recognition enough to a degree to where those kind of proof, different kinds of evidence, handwriting on the wall kind of events weren't what they needed. That's all. And that's not talking to everybody. But I mean, to a degree, it applies to all of us because I think it's not far-fetched to kind of assume that we're all, including myself, are all potentially in the second wave. Now, the second wave can also graduate to the same place that those in the first wave graduated to. Perhaps some being required to come back again to finish their overcoming, like Doe said would happen to some of those 38. So none of us are restricted in our growth. And but the time period is the second wave. And so that second wave started, I believe, with Doe's 1990s completion of the first wave, which was started by he and T in 1975. And Doe kind of marked that period by the 1988 document called 88 Update. And I should provide a link to that. I'm going to talk about it, so let me go get it. Let's see. 88 Update. It's on the Heaven's Gate website. You go to my blog and you search for apostrophe 88 space update. and you'll find it. But I'm going to try to give the exact document on my blog where it's posted. Okay. I'm not fast, I know that. I drove Cerroti crazy. No, he handled me. Let's see. I'm not saying handle me as like an accomplishment. Well, it would be an accomplishment for him because he was very quick in his thinking and everything. And so Doe had to correct him many times in meetings, saying that you're jumping ahead of me, or you're so he had to learn to slow down his brain, where I had to learn to speed up my brain. Anyway, back to what we're talking about here. Let's see if it prints here. This is the story of T and Doe's beginning, and addresses. Doe wrote it intending to address all the things that, well, I don't know about all the things, but the things that were most important for him to address, to correct rumors and things that had developed over the years. And so this is the horse speaking, the horse being Doe's horse, the vehicle that he took over. Well, not the horse speaking, actually. It's Doe speaking through his horse, to be more accurate. Good evening, Jeff. So as I was saying to begin with, which I hope Kate doesn't mind, Kate's biz help mind me just kind of mentioning what this picture is. It's the two solar eclipses, one that happened already and one that was to happen 7 years later in 2024, that I think we can assume that, well, I don't mean assume, but there's a great significance to that date. Now, I don't know if that marks the start of the next seal opening, which would be the 5th or the 6th. Well, I think we might be, well, no, I don't think we're in the 5th yet. To be honest with you, I might be wrong about that. The 5th seal, but so I think that might be the 6th seal, and that's when there's a series of years, I imagine, that things are escalating more to the recycling time in a big way. And we're leading up to it now, so we're all being prepared, and we can help prepare others. That it's not a negative, because even when we lose our vehicles, the next level will take care of those that want to be taken care of by the next level. That's what it really amounts to. And showing the next level that we want to be taken care of by them is by standing up for them, believing that they came from the physical evolutionary, many-membered kingdom level above human, who created the planet and all its life forms, and so standing up for that until we lose our vehicle, however that happens. And it's an open-ended kind of task, because they're not explaining how much standing means. It just means standing, and so it's a full choice on how much we stand up for them and in what ways. And there's no limit to it, and there's no it doesn't have to be all the internet. I'm gonna say it pertains to all of life, but to use common sense to be able to do it for as long as possible, we're going to pick and choose who we talk to, especially in our personal lives. I mean, lives, to where people could find offense with us to want to stop us from talking about it. So I don't recommend people going into their neighborhood churches. And they can. I'm not saying they can't, but do so gingerly. Actually, I shouldn't say, because I don't want to limit people, but just use the next level mind. I don't have the capacity to limit people. So if I say anything that's recommended not to do, don't believe me. What I say is talk to Tiendo about it. But use caution. That would be a Tiendo's way. That would be a way of the next level. To not go in there like gangbusters and tell them, okay, Tiendo, we're the return of the Father and Jesus, and if you don't accept them, then you're not going to the kingdom of heaven. I mean, if that's true, well, it's not true exactly, because we don't know if those spirits of all those human vehicles have been given soul implants, and to the soul implants, maybe that's what they would most respond to, hearing, because those vehicles would have been prepped for that, to hear that, and even in Tiendo's terminology, and I believe using all the terminology was always something that Tiendo are always grappling with. What terminology to use. Well, actually, they didn't really grapple with that for the beginning of it with T, because it wasn't that potency of information. Like I started to say before, wasn't what the souls that were meant to respond to Tiendo's information were meant to respond to, because they had previous experiences with what became the religious information. It wasn't the religious information 2,000 years ago, except to the degree that it interfaced with the Jewish information, the information that came from Moses. So I guess I'm really going off the track a lot here. It is related to that information, but because they had already accepted some of the souls that might be back here right now, I'm talking to. Well, I'm not saying anybody here listening to this in the future isn't among those that responded to Jesus, or among the 70 and the 500 and the 5,000. who knows how many of those, it's potentially thousands that heard Jesus speak over the course of that 3.5 years. Maybe it was 144,000. But that's what Tiendo said, that any soul that had a significant relationship with the next level incarnate members during this civilization and from before, potentially, would be coming back. So there I go. I corrected myself, and then I realized that I didn't exactly need that correction. Oh gosh, I'm sorry, but I guess that's what happens when I try to do this. I get tripped up, so I don't get to the point as quickly as I could. So the signs of how it's increasing, comes in spurts. It happens in spurts. And the negatives as well as the positives. And I wouldn't be at all surprised if the meteor showers have something to do with it. We just went through we're presently going through a big meteor shower. And like Tiendo said, the sun and the moon have a lot to do with the spurts. Like Tiendo said that I didn't talk about the astrology before, but this is the astronomy of how T said that what the new moon promises, the full moon fulfills. Now, that might have been a saying that astrologers had among themselves, because T was an astrologer in the years before she fully awoke to her next level task, which you could say that task was in progress from the birth of her vehicle, because the next level tagged the vehicles, and they said that the vehicles wouldn't have survived had the next level not tagged them in the 1920s. Now that means that since those vehicle was born in 1931, at least that's what the records we have say, which maybe those records are wrong, I don't know. But it doesn't matter because by tagging the vehicles, they could have tagged the actual egg in the mother that was to be the mother of Doe's vehicle. I mean, look at the example that we have of how the vehicle that was named Jesus came from the vehicle that was named Mary through some kind of artificial insemination. I mean, it's not artificial, really. It's the next level's natural way of seeding the vehicle. But it's artificial in terms of how it's more of an above human way of doing things. Which Tiendo said that it was more advanced to use artificial insemination. That I think what I got from when they said that was that they wouldn't have as much of the mammalian mind, the human mind, or the lower parts of the human mind. The reproductive parts are the lower part because they're more like the animal kingdom. It's not a moral thing, according to Tiendo. It's that's an animal behavior. And we have other animal behaviors the human vehicles do, eating and, of course, in common. All of the animal characteristics I think we humans have in common with animals. in terms of, being protective of their young, and those are good things. They're all good things. Tiendo said that humans need to be responsible for the children they produce. They facilitate the production of. But they are vehicles, and the vehicles aren't what graduate into the next level. Even though the next level takes some of the human vehicles into the next level so that they don't end up going into the graveyard or the cremation process. And Tiendo said those were the ones that were depicted as leaving with their vehicles, and that was Jesus and Elijah. And they said Moses was in that category as well, although Jewish historians and Christian historians I've never seen talk that way, because they didn't ever find his grave, the grave of Moses, as far as I know. That's what I believe they've said. And they didn't see him actually die. So that the next level did that to keep it a mystery. But Tiendo said that they felt like his vehicle was taken. And then the Enoch vehicle and the Adam vehicle wasn't taken, because the Adam vehicle started off the process of, so he had to go through some more lessons to not give in to the lower forces, the Luciferian, space alien, fallen angel souls that were brought to that particular area, I guess in the Middle East. I don't remember if Tiendo said that it was or wasn't in the Middle East, but I don't really have any reason to doubt it. That's where those rivers are that are mentioned in the book of Genesis that Moses wrote, that T said was Doe's task before he was Elijah, as well as being his task to incarnate as in the vehicle known as Jesus, and Enoch and Adam to start off the experiment. For those that may be watching this for the first time, watching and listening to this vehicle, to the mind that was coming through this vehicle, which I believe is we're not channelers, members of that are any of us that are talking about Tiendo's material are not challenges. No, channelers. Sorry, I got confused because of the way I said that. I think an example of how we can get messed with by the lower forces. They're the ones that want to trip us up and have us say things that aren't true. And the only thing that's true in my mind is what Tiendo provided. Now, if I'm linking things to what Tiendo provided, then that can be true, but it's not necessarily, because truth has degrees of truth. And Tiendo talked about that, and I talked about that in the previous live stream, how that Tiendo said in the Black Hawk tapes that people can listen to on my website here, on the channel here, by searching for Black Hawk through my videos, some early videos I made that are, they said that they had new information to share during those meetings. And they didn't often say that at a meeting. And they said if they understood 50% of that new information, they felt like that was good. That was because if we understood 50% of that 50%, they thought we were doing good. That's the way I interpret it. Now, if anyone goes back and listens to that, I'd like to actually have those tapes transcribed, and I'm not trying to say what anybody should do on that score, because I could do it myself if I could discipline my vehicle to do it. But I do try to keep up with a lot, so I don't feel like, if anybody else wants to do any transcribing, I'm not saying that they have to do that one, but it's left to be done. I know Nisha is doing some transcribing still, and she's done a lot. And because if we have the transcriptions, then we can put them into text format and add that to the packets that are sent out to people when they ask for them. And people can search through just using a text editor, or even just, the operating system find command. I think that can be used to find keywords. And then to get all the things that Tiendo said through all those 196 audio tapes would be phenomenal to be able to do. So that we can show people the proof of a lot of the things that I'm even saying, because a lot of the things that were said to me during those meetings that we have 196 tapes of, I have no way to prove to anybody that Tiendo said those things. And also, there's no way for people to check me on those things to see that I got the right interpretation. Because I don't know if I got, I know that if I got 50% of what they said, I don't know that I did. In fact, I know that I probably didn't. Well, I don't know that. I'm not the judge of that. Because the percentages aren't, meant to be like exact numbers, I don't think. But I may be wrong about that. I shouldn't say what's not, right? That's a golden rule. I mean, Tiendo didn't believe in can't. It's won't, or won't try. They expected the best from their students. They didn't want people to be satisfied with a little bit of service or a little bit of change in their vehicle's growth towards membership in the next level. That's, I believe, gospel from Tiendo's mind. That's also apparent in, I think, many of the tapes, if not all of them, have that sense given to us. That this was a task. This was a difficult task to take over a horse in the human kingdom. And these vehicles that we all have are like horses. And I fed a horse today because I was taking care of some animals on a little farm that a friend of mine has. And when the horse was down the hill, because they've got a big pasture land and a place they can go outside the weather, and so when I poked my head down the hill because I could get some vantage point, Blackie came running up, eager to get his snack, because that's when he gets his green. We're all like that. We all have our programming, have our vehicles programming. And the vehicles in the Transfiguration Diet book, that's where T and Doe, well, Doe, because T wasn't in her vehicle when they published that, when Doe published that. Doe and crew, I should say, published that. I was like a guinea pig, actually. That's what my participation was, which I was willing to be, and I was enjoying being. I was honored to be a guinea pig for Doe's classroom. On the diet, the Transfiguration Diet. And in that he said that there were three types of mind. Or no, whenever somebody used the word I, there were potentially three different directions that I is representing. They said it much better in the book. I should find it and just read it. Maybe I will. I have written this down on my blog. Where was it? I think there is a table of contents. The A foods, reprogramming your genes. Reprogramming your genes. There's a lot of geneticists. Well, I don't know if there's a lot, but I suspect there's some people that are, well, maybe not anymore. It doesn't make any difference. But for a long time, people thought that your genes couldn't be programmed. You were born with them, and that's it. Can't change them. Oh, right there, page 13. Okay. I'm going to put that screen up there so you can maybe see it, see the illustration. You know what I'll do? I'll change the screen to this. And then I'll expand this to be like that. And then I'll put this up there. I don't know if you can actually read that. I see it hasn't come across at least my screen yet on YouTube, but I was holding up the book, Transfiguration Diet. Oh, there it is. And it's going to get bigger. I'm going to make it bigger, but I need to go back with this. And back to my Eclipse screen for the moment. And so I'm going to read it. For the sake of the three eyes, who's talking? But that in the cartoon looking thing in the top of it was drawn by Dan Sodi. He was one of the two resident artists. I mean, it might have been more that had that artistic capacity, but I only knew about Alodi, who did the paintings, and Dan Sodi, who did these drawings for the Transfiguration Diet book. Anyway, so it shows somebody standing in front of a mirror, and to the right of the mirror, looking on, is Dr. Little Green, who looks like a little green man, but he's not green in color. He just used a a pen to draw three-dimensional looking figures. And that individual is Dr. Littlegreen, which I think is like depicting Doe, because he wears a cowboy hat at one point, so he's from Texas. Or it could be a T, if you want to look at it that way, it's fine. But in their next level vehicle, and that individual is saying, well, the individual that's looking in the mirror, also on the screen is like a trash can that's got a package of cookies in it. And all you can see in the cookie label is OKIES, Okies. I don't think that's an accident. They're Okies, so that's for the old-fashioned people, the Okies from a stogie. They're the ones that eat the cookies. I don't know if that's true. And Okies can be from, London or New York or Washington or Los Angeles. It doesn't matter where they are, or Saudi Arabia. It's because they're not really good for us. The carbohydrates and the sugar really isn't good for the vehicle's cleansing, being a cleansing diet. Anyway, so the individual looking in the mirror is saying, vehicle, you don't need those cookies. That's just your genes talking. And then Dr. Littlegreen says, by George, you got it. Theodore had a little joke that they said that, Howard be thy name. Howard be thy name. Talking about the hallowed be thy name. Little quips, I guess I could say. So then let me read this. For the sake of understanding, it works best to picture or image that within each of us there are three eyes, or three voices that use the word I. For example, when we say, I like so-and-so, if it's an intuitive like, or like that's been with us most of our life, instead of a disciplined like, it's the ancestral genetic heritage that is speaking, or the genes carrying that ancestral programming. If it's a learned like that is not intuitive, it's probably the result of environmental influences or direct experiences we have had during this life that made a strong impression upon us. The genes also house the environmental influences or experiences learned during this life. If we say, I like such and such, and we like it only because we recognize the value of it, or feel it is more right even though we would intuitively tend to like the opposite, or if it is a disciplined like, then this is the mind talking and reflects a lesson learned in our genetic past. Certain parts of our genetic structure also have pockets for housing the mind that others refer to as spirit or soul. These three voices, mind, heritage, environment, all express themselves through the brain. So how do we learn to identify which voice is speaking? First, let's talk about our genetic heritage. A good analogy that works for us is to think of genes as tiny information chips, similar to those in a computer. They contain all the information passed on through our bloodline or ancestral heritage regarding physical appearance and constitution, likes and dislikes, attitudes, responses, and ways of thinking, how we express ourselves, desires and opinions, weaknesses and strong points, literally everything about us. Subconsciously, these genes will respond automatically, transmitting those thoughts into our consciousness, and we interpret them simply as our opinion, voicing itself. We don't have to waste a lot of energy figuring out which source the voice is coming from. That investigation doesn't serve us, except in the understanding that the wise voice of mind, which has learned lessons, will be the source of responses that will choose to restrain us from destructive paths. Anything less than a response of restraint because of a lesson learned is the vehicle, body, talking, the voice of the genetic programming from the blood strain and or environment. It helps us to substitute the word vehicle for body in our vocabulary because of the way most of us today are programmed to respond to these two words. In many cases, body is connected with lower animal parallel responses, manifesting in self-consciousness, modesty, and sensuality, whereas vehicle is a more objective term, not having those same associations. The mind and the vehicle are completely separate, the mind having existed before we ever came into this life. Again, the mind has no relationship to the genetic characteristics of the vehicle, neither to the genes programmed from the inherited bloodline, nor to those programmed by the environment during this life. Remember, we're not talking about the brain when using the word mind. The brain is that part of the vehicle which acts as a receiver and transmitter of the genetic signals. Our team's vernacular uses the word mind in the same context as religious terminology does in reference to the spirit or soul. The clarification of this usage is in no way intended to propose or endorse any particular religion, though the terminology could seem to suggest such. We're merely trying to clarify the understanding of this three-voice concept: mind, heritage, environment. Whether this terminology is suitable in the eyes of some is really of no concern to us. The fact is that using it to implement the concept of genetic reprogramming has proven unquestionably to work to a T. T-E-E is the word that's spelt there. The technique is so successful and yields such remarkable consistency in results that our team is currently involved in exploring this topic in depth. The I, in reference to the mind, speaks always with the most respectable and learned evaluation. For the sake of clarification, whenever we use the words I, we, or you in this book, it is generally the mind we are referring to, that part of us which wants to improve. It is therefore our task, our mind's task, to talk to our vehicles, direct them in all their actions, and continually work to improve and refine the vehicle's genetic characteristics. We're sure that most of you have employed this reprogramming technique anytime you exercised restraint or discipline for whatever motivational purpose. For example, if you avoided eating sweets because you wanted to lose weight, then you were unconsciously using this technique. In other words, if a voice inside you says, I really want a piece of candy, and you exercise discipline by coming back with, no, I'm not going to eat any, then this is an example of your mind talking back to your vehicle. Only the voice of the vehicle, the genetic programming, would state such a strong liking for a food you know is harmful, while the mind is the voice that tries to get you back on track. I'm going to keep on reading. Food as fuel is the next category. I'm going to take a drink of water though. Hope I'm doing an okay job with the reading. I know I'm trying to get better at it so that it sounds as natural as the way they were, as Doe would say it. I know I don't have his, only a tiny bit of his mind, but even a tiny bit goes a long way for us all. So food as fuel. We believe a more evolved concept of food is that it is simply fuel to supply the body with the nutrients and energy it needs. Putting fuel in a vehicle body can be treated as objectively as putting gasoline in an automobile. Even though most human vehicles are in the habit of eating for pleasure, and they associate having food with holidays, parties, celebrations, or family gatherings, we believe that eating was never intended to be a social event. For the most part, the concept of eating to supply fuel and nutrients for the body seems to have gone by the wayside. How did this happen? One explanation is that over generations, people gradually moved further away from eating foods in their original form and began eating more and more cooked, processed, and elaborately prepared foods. While cultural changes and modern methods of transportation led to the current trend of eating on the run, science and technology responded with convenience foods and fast foods that are pre-cooked, pre-packaged, and treated with chemicals and preservatives. Now these foods are accepted as the norm, and this programming has become incorporated into our genes. In many parts of the country, if we tell someone we don't eat meat, or we eat mostly fruits and vegetables, they frequently will respond with something like, "What are you, some kind of health nut?" As if it were strange. They seem to associate this approach to eating with certain cultural groups, rather than as a means for anyone to improve his or her health. How do we get so turned around in our thinking? We've gotten so far away from eating foods in their original state that it's hard to find a restaurant that serves basic, unadulterated foods that aren't overcooked, masked by sauces, or made into concoctions. Some people actually find simple fruits and vegetables unappealing. This is only because their vehicles have become so accustomed to foods whose flavors have been buried by spices, sweeteners, seasonings, and sauces, that their taste buds are dulled. How can we turn this around? The first step is to change the way we think. We found that using different terminology was extremely helpful in changing the way we think about food. For example, using fuel instead of food and consuming instead of eating stimulated different responses from our vehicles. Consuming and fuel aren't part of our old programming. regarding eating. Thus, they don't activate the same digestive and thinking processes. To illustrate this, all we have to do is think about food or that it's time to eat, and the vehicle gets excited and says, "Oh boy, food," and the mouth starts to water. But this response doesn't happen when we use the words consume or fuel, because they don't trigger the same programmed genetic impulses. It always amazes us that the simplest techniques seem to yield the greatest results. For example, a very effective tool in changing our programming is to avoid ever saying, "I'm hungry" or "I'm starved." First of all, the mind doesn't get hungry, so we know right off this is the vehicle talking, the voice of the genes. To say "I'm really hungry" or I'm starved implies the need for large volumes of fuel, when in fact say this out of habit. When in fact people say this out of habit, and it usually doesn't reflect a true need. So when the vehicle says "I'm hungry," we, our minds, quickly step in and say, "Vehicle, you're not hungry. You're just a little low on energy, and you could use some fuel." If the vehicle comes back with, "What do you mean? I'm starved," we need to say more forcefully something like, "Vehicle, you are not starved. I'm not going to listen to that. You simply need fuel." In the beginning, the vehicle will probably continue to argue back. For instance, after coming back from work, the vehicle might say, "Cookies, I need cookies." And the mind says, "Now wait a second, you're going to have dinner in an hour. Cookies are full of sugar and they are harmful to your body. You don't need them." Then the vehicle comes back with, "Just a couple can't hurt." But the mind rallies with, "Don't give me that. I know if I let you eat one cookie, you'll eat a dozen." Then the genetic signals may try again to tempt you to give in. And without being conscious of it, your hand may be on the cookie jar. At this point, the mind has to be strong and say, "Vehicle, stop. You don't need cookies. Everything is okay. Just relax. We're doing fine." This last example demonstrates how we sometimes also try to calm the vehicle, let it know we're on its side, and encourage it to cooperate with us. Each of us has to learn when a firm approach or a gentle approach yields the best results from our vehicle. In a sense, when the voice of the old programming speaks up, it's like another person inside of us, or like a child trying to convince us of something. But remember, no matter how loud the vehicle's voice gets, the mind is stronger than the vehicle. Every time we refuse to give in to what the vehicle wants to do, we build strength of mind. If we develop the strength, the next time the same habit responses shows up, it is easier to control. The more we practice talking to the vehicle this way, the stronger the stamp programming we make on the vehicle's genes. Our experience has shown that in time we can simply ignore the impulse from the vehicle and there's no need for dialogue. In other words, as soon as the slightest hint of a desire for cookies enters the brain, the mind can block it out without argument from the vehicle. The only reason for any dialogue is that we haven't yet learned how to keep the vehicle from getting its 2 cents in. Wow. Should I continue reading? I'll go to the chat room for a second. I was reading from the book, if you just joined me, The Transfiguration Diet. I put that on the screen before. If you go back in this live stream, you can see the first page of it that I put up on a big screen. It's a book that, if you're not familiar with it, it's a book that Doe and Crew wrote published in 1986, I believe it was. So it was the first big project after T left her vehicle. The first edition, 1986, is the copyright by Little Green Ink. And the cover says Little Green Ink's think tank. It says on the bottom, your genes characteristics can be reprogrammed. In big letters, it says trans figure in the second line, Asian. It's interesting how Asian comes from, I believe, the word nation. Well, that's one form of it, I guess. And nation means in the New Testament, people, the people. But the people as a unit, maybe more than just random people, like an entity. And it says transfiguration diet, an extraordinary advanced turnaround concept regarding man and food, health or disease. Turnaround concept. So if you know anybody that's got a disease, and we all know people, and we do sometimes, we all do, and just a matter of how much it surfaces and when, and to what degree, because disease is strictly talking about illness in the vehicle. You get a cold, that's an illness of the vehicle. It's cleansing, trying to get rid of the mucus. And so your nose runs, our noses run, and by following the transfiguration diet, we're cleansing constantly. And I have to say, even can eat the no foods and get away with it to some degree. Because we followed this diet in the classroom for a period of time, but Doe also believed that it was good to change diets. And we went back to eating raw food. We went over to eating raw foods more, and even more kind of grow your own sprouts, a little to continue to go through different degrees of cleansing. And after about a year doing that, we went back into eating, putting more vegetables in our diet and steamed vegetables. Well, the steamed vegetables are in this diet, in the transfiguration diet. So it's not a raw diet. Doe felt like that the rawness was sometimes too hard on our systems to have too much raw. And so we had to, there needed to be a balance. And so but we had one meal that was completely raw, I believe, in our diet. And then we had another meal that was totally cooked. Like, for instance, baked potatoes with extra virgin olive oil, cold pressed. They didn't specify cold pressed, but I would guess that it wasn't treated by heat, so it wasn't. So they basically could have more enzymes in it. So I think that would be T&Do's intention, because at one time we were taking enzymes in addition to vitamins and herbs as supplements. And this diet has kelp supplements in it, and molasses supplement in it, and the cayenne pepper supplement that is a big time supplement, I think, for a lot of things. If you do nothing else on this diet, I think everybody can benefit I don't know if everybody can, but I think it's worth considering that everybody can benefit from therapeutic use of cayenne pepper. The actual the herb, the grain, if you want to call it a grain, the pepper made into a powder. I don't know how it compares to the actual jalapenos, the live ones, which we did have some of that, I believe sometimes. But what we used therapeutically was cayenne pepper. Now, ask me about that or go to my blog and search on cayenne pepper, and you'll see the parts of the Transfiguration Diet book in there, including what I just read, I think, is in there. And so let me go back to the chat room. Okay, double the God is in the chat room, and he says, or he or she says, he or she or somebody that's considers themselves both or neither. Okay. It's been a while since I was here. Nice checking in. When is the spading under? Is a question from Bader Meinhof. I don't know. I know it's soon. I know that, and I think from what Tiendo said in the UFO Missionaries Extraordinary book, within the lifetime of the generation that is receiving the information from Tiendo that they know is from Tiendo. And I think so that means within our own generation right now, the people that are able to understand Tiendo's information right now, and maybe for a while, within their lifespan, I think would be the outside of that, but probably even maybe only refers to the lifespan of Tiendo. Well, no, because they said there were 3 types that would go with them. So it does refer to after that. So it's the time frame that I don't know how to describe in accurate terms. But as long as we have Tiendo's information, we know that time frame hasn't passed. In other words, of course, the spading hasn't passed until the whole infrastructure of the beast. Well, I don't know exactly the whole infrastructure. I shouldn't say it that way. But until the beast is sent into the lake of fire, which appears to be fire in all its ways, from the sun, from the fires that start on the planet, from the lava that comes out of the volcanoes, from the fire of passion in terms of disease, and how the radioactivity materials, potentially from nuclear war and what the humans are putting into the atmosphere through the nuclear generators that are really shedding toxins over the planet, but are part of the Green New Deal to allow it to happen. Scratch your head, right? Talking about global warming, and we're putting these hot particles into the air 24/7 by all these generators that those particles don't die. And they're heavier than air, so when they're thrown into the air, they potentially all settle down somewhere when the winds take them and stir them up, and then when there's no wind, fall into the ocean and fall into people's land and into their water supply. And they're not dead because they've got this half-life that is enormous. So yes, humans are contributing to global warming. But CO2 is trivial compared to everything else. Less than 1% of the atmosphere is global warming, and yet the CO2 is CO2. Less than 1% of the atmosphere. The rest, most of it's nitrogen, 79% or so. And 20% or so is oxygen. And 1% is different gases. And CO2 isn't even, is supposed to be 0.04% is CO2. And so even if you double what we have now, you'd still have less than 1%. So now what kind of a blanket, if CO2 is the blanket over the earth that's causing the water to heat up the oceans, to melt the glaciers, then that's the 1%. That's that's holding in that heat, and that's going to be enough of the heat that originally came from the sun in combination with the sun as a reflection off the earth to actually heat the oceans. Well, yes, the sun's heat does heat the oceans. We know that. We're not saying that the sun isn't heating the earth. They're saying that humans' activity is heating the earth. And so that means that in order for the temperature of the earth and the water to heat up, that means that's called the back radiation. It's the back radiation that's being reflected down. There is a degree of that radiation reflecting down, and we can see that in the cities that are warmer. That's a back radiation of heat. Because there's so many cars in the cities and industry and air conditioners and electricity, and that's all producing heat. And so, cities in the winter are like what? Maybe it is more than 1 degree warmer than the outlying areas. It depends if there's any wind or not that's blowing it around. And it might depend on how fast it's dissipating also, so that it's more in the summer, because it doesn't get canceled out as fast, I think, by the cold air. But there's almost always a little bit of circulation. But you can actually see in the cities, I guess we've all experienced seeing the smog over the cities. So that's the example of of the CO2 and everything else, all the other gases, methane gas, and accumulating so that you can see it. And you can also see when it's gone. Now, if you saw that over the whole planet at the same time, then you could say, wow, that's a... Now, even if that was happening over the whole planet, and you can see it because there's that much more particles, carbon particles in the air, then still you'd have to come up with a formula on how much of that is adding to the heat of the sun on the planet. And well, I guess you can calculate that by let's say if it was all over the whole planet, then I guess comparing it to the amount that the cities are heated up could be applied to the oceans. Okay, let's say that's true, that it was actually distributing itself, which it's not. It's not distributing itself evenly over the whole planet at all. But if it was, then that would be like taking what the average temperature is of the ocean, okay, on its surface. Let's say it's on the surface. So that would be the warmest part of the ocean. And so what temperature would the air have to be to influence the ocean temperature by 1 degree? And is that enough to, because it wouldn't be the same as heating the air around. See, because the carbon in the city, although it's the temperature is increasing in the city because of the amount of carbon that's in the air and other things, isn't necessarily heating the ground, except for the part of the ground where the subways are. But it's not necessarily heating the actual earth, like beneath that subway system. It's potentially just heating a little bit of it. Okay, so now the oceans are constantly mixing its temperature. Okay, so to get a consistent 1 degree of change, and how much that would actually heat the glaciers, we do. There is melting of the glaciers every year that happens. And so, has it been more? Well, if it's been more, okay, which I don't doubt necessarily, but there's a lot of propaganda around this. I've read some of the materials that talked about the areas that they were showing photos of weren't necessarily areas that weren't going through that every year. In Greenland and in the Arctic and in Antarctica. I've seen reports to that nature. Now, since those reports aren't the rule, I think those reports are to be taken more seriously than the reports that humans are causing these things to happen faster. When the sun is the biggest culprit with coronal holes, which actually I wanted to add to this other screen I have. But well, I mean, anyway, the science in trying to change the temperature of the ocean by even 1 degree, um, I think requires like 3,300 degrees, or no, maybe it was in a different form of measurement. But it was this enormous amount of heat that needed to, uh, because you're talking about a big area that needs to be changed. And so we could duplicate that experiment by saying, filling up a bathtub with water that's approximately the average of the ocean temperature. Okay, I don't know what that is, but you could probably find it out, and or whatever we can get, and then putting heaters in the room, and maybe as small of a room as possible, and then figure out how much air is in that room can be calculated, I think, and then add heat to it, and have a thermometer in the room, and have a thermometer on the surface of the water, and then see if you can change that thermometer surface in the water. I might have to go through. I might have to do this test one day to see if I can get it to change, because that would then show a relationship of change and for how long it took for that to take place. That change relative to that body of water, and then you can take that and transpose it, or transpolate. Actually, I think is the way to say it. That to the size of the ocean, and what people are saying is that the NOAA space satellite is saying is the content of CO2 in the atmosphere is. But the reason I was bringing that up was because of that what they're measuring as the temperature is the temperature of the air. It's not the temperature of the Earth. I know that's an obvious thing to say, but I don't know. It just maybe I'm overanalyzing it. Anyway, I mean, I've tried to look at this. When that's when you got Well, so I was going to put a different screen up. So let me do that so I can follow through a little bit with this. No, that's not what I wanted. That's not what I wanted. Nope, that's not one either. Although that can be one. Let's see here a second. Maybe I should add it to this one. Yeah, let me add it to this one. Let's see here. Bear with me for a second, please. Coronal hole 1. And I need to go to Picks for live stream. It's good. There it is. Right there. I love that. Love it when a plan comes together. Okay, so I see the screens are updating on my YouTube channel. They're actually coming pretty quick. And you haven't got the last one yet, though. While I'm waiting, I'll go to the chat room. Okay, Double the God says, double of the God. Was the lady T and Doe talk to back in the day? She was from Redwood City, a woman named Maria, who did hypnotherapy. No, T didn't do any hypnotherapy. She was an astrologer. So I think it's somebody else that you're thinking of. There, I finally saw my screen update. And then double the God says in the chat room, when T and Doe went to Mount Shasta, California, with a group of people, were they from Redwood City, California? Oh, well, I don't know Maria, but T and Doe did go to Shasta and by themselves before they had students, and then they went to Shasta. Then they went to Shasta a second time, I believe, with students that they had started to have in April of 1975, or thereafter, in the months after. I wasn't with them until they got to Oregon, Walport, Oregon, in September of 1985. So there were, T and Doe had gathered their first students, their first real students, starting in April of 75. So, and I don't. They did hold meetings in the Bay Area, Canada College, and Stanford University. And I think they held another meeting, maybe in the area you're talking about. It's possible. I just don't remember specifically that area. I mean, but I can look in the Heaven's Gate book to see if they held a meeting in Redwood City, if that's what you want to know. We're talking about somebody that anyway, no, I don't want to take the time to do that right now because I don't have it marked the exact spot. I should do that one of these days. But I don't think that's what you were talking about anyway. So I'm going to Yeah, now Tiando weren't originally from Redwood City, so if anybody was from Redwood City, it would be either the group of people that they met in Shasta, or people that came to a meeting that they had in that vicinity, or people that lived on. I said that already. Let's see. Or people that joined from North Hollywood meeting or from the Bay Area meetings, and then were camping with Tiando up in that area. And that could have also happened in 1994 when a group went up through that area and held meetings in those areas, which would have been students. And I was doing that, holding meetings in other parts of the country, not in Northern California. Anyway, so double the God, when they went only for a while the first time, then they were chased away from bees. Oh, yeah, they were chased away by bees. That's right. That's the first time that Tiando went there in approximately 1973 or 4, or early 5 even. I don't remember the exact date of that. That was Tiando, right. And when they went to Shasta, they met with some people that tried to get them to be their leaders, so that they've been waiting for them. And Tiando felt like they needed to get out of there. And so when they left, a bunch of bees came close to attacking them, followed them, but they ran and got into their car before the bees could actually bite them. And they didn't say any more details of whether they were swatting them or if any of them didn't get bit. I don't remember them saying whether they got bit or not. But they felt like those the lower forces that were after them. So, in other words, the space aliens or the space alien souls were or discarnates or discarnates were stimulating the bees to go after them, which I don't doubt that's possible. Okay, then double the God says, when they went only for a while the first time when they were, I said that already. Then Bader Meinhof says, there are no laws on Ceres, just cops. Just cops on Ceres? The dwarf planet Ceres? Got me on that one. Anyway, so Craig S. says, hey Sawyer, I'm not sure if you've ever talked about this, but have you ever done DMT? No, I never have. I did a bunch of other stuff in my early years. Then Bader Meinhof says he does THC. Yes, I do use a little THC sometimes. And then Jeff says, just ate a caramel apple. Feel guilty now. Now, there were times in the classroom where Tiando felt we needed to have sweets, and we got a lot of candy. They said it helped us, our brains function better. So you don't have to feel guilty about that. And diets need to change, but if you want to go on a cleansing diet, and you want to instill this discipline upon your vehicle, then try it for a while. There's no rule that says that it started with a 3-day apple juice fast, and Tiando made some sweet treats out of dates. We had dates for a while, very sweet. We had dates and bananas. Well, the dates that grow on, I'm talking about the dates. The dates? Yeah, not figs. We had figs too. We had raisins also. And then we ground up the raisins and made little raisin balls that were rolled in coconut. So they weren't saying that you couldn't have sugar. I mean, they were saying you couldn't have sugar, meaning refined sugar, was what was bad for your body. And molasses is also very sweet. And we had maple syrup also, very sweet. I don't know if they would have approved of brown rice syrup. We didn't have rice at all, so I would say stay away from brown rice syrup and use these other sweeteners. I'm glad you brought that up. Because the Transfiguration diet was also because carbohydrates, processed carbohydrates, are also relate back to being a sugar in the system. It's a complex carbohydrate, and so it translates into a sugar in the body. And there wasn't any of that in the Transfiguration diet. There was no bread, there were no cookies, no things of that sort. And there was no flesh either, and no dairy. It was like a vegan diet, without any grain, unless the grains were slow cooked. So you could have grain, like we had millet, we had wheat berries that were slow cooked so that the temperature didn't get like above 140 degrees. And so it didn't kill the enzymes in those grains. It's not like grains were evil. So we had those grains with, and don't put a little maple syrup sweetener, I think, in them, if I remember correctly. So we had them like a cereal in the morning. They were kind of hard to take. I mean, I don't remember, really enjoying them, but that was after years of having Maltameal every day, or oatmeal, or cream of wheat. That was what we were, for the whole 1970s and 80s. Well, not the whole, till 1986. That's mostly what we had for breakfast. And we had eggs sometimes, like once a week, and bacon with the eggs during that time. And after we did this cleansing diet, we went back to, we had meats again. And we also had desserts. We had all kinds of elaborate desserts. We had tiramisu. We had Italian wedding cake. Because Doe felt like it was good to change diets too. So I'm talking about, don't feel guilty about it, but try this diet. Don't assume that you can't do it because, you don't want to go through the discipline of the caramel apple. I mean, you can. I'm just saying that it would be good for your mind development to discipline your vehicle. And if you can do it to the point to where you're satisfied by the Transfiguration diet, it won't be easy necessarily. I mean, you have to have the time to do it, to cook things and to prepare things, and it takes a lot more time because you're washing a lot more things. And washing, I used to get ribbed by classmates or tea and dough, because I would say washing when I meant to say washing. I say a little in between that now, naturally, I guess. It shows my New York accent. Anyway, so I'll keep on going. David J. Rowland says, eating sweet food is often a habit similar to stopping smoking. Yes, can be. I do. I go through periods where the habit is broken, but I'll go back and restart at some time later. I guess that I enjoy torturing myself. Yeah, I do the same thing. But I'm not, I haven't been doing it with sweets because I have an added problem. I have tooth problems that the slightest amount of sugar in any form stimulates. So I don't do raisins or dates or figs or anything like that. So for me, it's probably beneficial to have some carbohydrates that boil down to sugar. I'm just guessing. I don't know what Tiendo would think about it because I'm not being able to handle the natural sugars like maple syrup and things like that, the unprocessed sugars. And then maple syrup would be the grade B, the lowest grade of maple syrup. I don't know if they have grade B anymore, but they call it, around here they have a name for it. What is it? I forgot the name of it. But you want the least refined maple syrup. And molasses is a stage in refinement of sugar. And since that was in the Transfiguration diet, it wasn't used that much. I think we took it as a supplement, as a tablespoon of it, like in a big soup spoon kind of. But I have a reaction to that too, so I maybe should try it. Sometimes I have a little coffee and I put cream in it. But I cheat all the time on the diet. I eat pretty much anything I want. But I had to get more strict. And I had to say no to a lot of things because of the Lyme's disease. So the Next Level helped me when I got the Lyme's disease. I'm not saying they made me get it or anything. I don't know that they do that, but they could have. They could have helped me in that way, knowing that if I did it, then I would learn some things of what I didn't need and how to heal the vehicle so I could pass it on to other people. I've got a testimony that I've been cured of the Lyme disease. It took about 3 years, but that was partially because I wasn't going 100% with it. And I still have to be careful. Not to go overboard on eating the mucus-forming foods. Okay, so I'm caught up in the chat room. Hello, DJ Taconic and Cub Doggy. Hello. So I put on the screen that picture on the bottom left, which is just a hole in the sun that happened in, I believe it was July of 2013. The first time. It's happened since then a few times, but not all that often. Was it 2013 that happened? Yeah, 2013. The picture was taken from the SOHO space telescope that is looking at the sun, I think 24/7, one side of the sun. And it's really interesting to look at this picture, and it looks like the stars in the background. I'll expand it for a second. I mean, that's the way they described it. They had Stanton Friedman on this documentary that I saw, talking about the NASA unexplained files. It was at about the 10-minute mark that they started to talk about the hole in the sun. And they said it looked like someone just swiped and took a chunk out of it. And they were saying that maybe the space aliens did it. Well, they don't know that the next level can do that, but the space aliens can't do that. I'm certain of that. Because they don't have the capacity to do much. That's why they need humans. That's why they need human DNA, and they want humans to develop spacecrafts to go up, to find some place to make into a new Earth before they're recycled, and there's a new crop of space aliens. Because the space aliens aren't all from outer space. They're just the descendants of individuals that were originally from different places in outer space that were drawn to the Earth in a previous civilization to go through an astronaut training program. And the bar was raised when by Adam flunking the test he took, his failure. So Doe even knew how to handle failure because Doe was the individual that was in the vehicles. Adam, Enoch, Moses, Elijah, Jesus, and then one of the two witnesses, and then the man that was birthed to the throne in Revelation 12. And Doe was the name he used when he took the throne, which we saw when he left. He was speaking as the ruler of the earth. Even though he wasn't the chief administrator, he said he was the chief administrator. Oh, okay, you see the screen just came back there. So it's like you could see stars in the background. Now, I don't know if those are actually stars or parts of the sun that are just, or a combination of both. And there's another one there too, isn't it? And another one, kind of different relationships to that one. All right, so, the reason I wanted to bring that up is because they were talking about how the sun sends out a huge amount of solar wind from these coronal holes. And so now it doesn't mean that the sun is like a donut, but it does mean that the next level can potentially instruct the sun mechanism to change its frequencies in a certain area to where our eyes and our detection instruments see through it, become transparent. And that's what next level vehicles can do as well. That's why Jesus wasn't able to be seen when he came into that upper room. He just appeared, they said. And Tiendo taught that members of the next level vehicles that Jesus had converted his to through a metamorphosis could change its vibrations. And so, and the spacecrafts that they also grow can also change their vibrations so that they can't be seen by humans. And they can also create cloud cover so humans can see them, which helps humans recognize that they have physicality, because they are physical, the spacecrafts. Dense physical, even. As dense as any matter, potentially. They can be the size of a planet and become invisible. They can potentially be right on top of the house that we live in, with members of the next level, with physical vehicles that are all turning off their frequency so that we can't see them. And it could be among anyone they want to be among. It was all taught by Tiendo. So we have the evidence that the sun heats the planet in different ways from the Carrington event. I talked about that in the previous broadcast. But since I'm back onto that subject, I feel like I need to keep on tapping onto that subject because people are being conned into, looking to humans for answers. When the next level is bringing on all these things that are happening with the hurricanes and the droughts and the way that the humans their systems are failing and starting these fires, and the periodic earthquakes, and that are even occurring a little stronger recently in California, all these things are happening, and the volcanoes that are erupting more than ever before, even though we haven't experienced the biggest ones yet, that were happening in the early 1900s, and maybe in the mid 1800s as well, or late 1800s. I think there were some. So we haven't even gotten up to the strongest of those events yet. Wow, it's getting cold in here. I'm going to turn this guy on. So the Carrington event melted wires, and this was in 1859, I think it was, if I remember correctly. And yet, some of them were able to still transmit telegraph messages or Morse code or something over those wires that had that ended up getting fried, melted. They had other problems too related to that. And they knew there were solar flares at that time. They were actually able to see them, I believe, because they had early telescopes early on, well before that. Anyway, so I might end this broadcast a little early. I'm starting to feel a little tired. And I mean, I started the broadcast with the screen that I'll go back to before I leave, in case anybody just joined me. Kind of like a sun-focused live stream. I started with the screen here of the two eclipses, the one that happened already and the one that was about to happen in 2024, which are total eclipses of the sun that happened to make when you followed their path, happened to make an X over the place where Tecumseh, the area where Tecumseh, the Indian chief Tecumseh, in the early 1800s, experienced a comet and said that, and prophesied the comet. And the prophecy came true. So look up TE and T. Originally, T was spelled TE. And then Doe ended up saying that he likes spelling it TI, but still pronouncing it T, which TI doesn't really sound like. And then at one point he said it didn't matter how you spelled it, but it was pronounced T, comparing it to do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, or do, dear, tea, a drink with jam and bread. And there was a time where tea could only hold down toast, dry toast, and tea. Because she burned out her vehicle, according to Doe. Dealing with the negativity from the world, from students, from Doe potentially, I guess. Because T, Doe recognized was his older member. And so in relationship to his older member, he still had some characteristics, I guess, or mind that was not as strong as his mind. And so he would allow more things to... He talked about this in one of those 1994 tapes that I played on this website, and that you can download from ForShared, and you can, that Carlin had posted there, and that you can get also in packets from me and probably Carlin also. I don't know if he sends out these packets. I know he was sending out some tapes, CDs with the tapes on them. I send them as digital packets. And some of the transcripts are on my blog, Sawyer HG. You're all probably been to this broadcast many times. 8 individuals watching right now. So I guess you got the screen with the X marks the spot by now. And I don't know what that marks, but I guess if I'm going to guess, I would say that it's talking about, oh, you know what? Revelation chapter 6, towards the end, talks about the sixth seal being open, that the sun becomes darkened, and I think I better go to it. I better go to it. So, Revelation 6. There it is. So it's during the time of the sixth seal, and it says, "And I beheld when he had opened the sixth seal, and lo, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth of hair, and the moon became as blood." Now let's see, if the earth moved, yeah, when the earth goes in between, when the moon is between the earth and the sun gets blotted out, right? And that's an eclipse. I guess that could mean that. Or it could mean it's filled with sunspots. Because to being described as a sackcloth of hair, to me sounds, it's a burlap bag, and the burlap is kind of hairy. So to me, that's saying that a sunspot looks more like that. That would be my guess on that. And I think that is when the moon becomes blood, is also during an eclipse. So that's pretty close to a depiction of an eclipse right there. So that might be as early as 24, if not before then. I don't know what that means, because TNO didn't give that to me directly. So it might not mean any of those things. It's not, as far as the time frame. Let's see here a second. Sun is the word helios. Black is the Greek word melos. It's primary word for black. Sackcloth is mohair. That's like hair. Or it's an example of it. Sackcloth, for example, mohair. So the humans put that in there. the material or garments made of it, worn as a sign of grief. Well, see, this would be a grief time because it would be when the recycling would really start to get underway. It's not complete by then because during the seventh seal opening, that's when the 144,000 are sealed. Sealed means, I believe, judged to be saved. We're talking about spirits and souls and or souls. So the individual that was talking about the recycling, and I wouldn't say, Sawyer said it was going to be 2026 because of, I'm not saying it's 2026. I don't know when it is. 2024, I mean. I don't know when it is. I'm just showing you the solar eclipses that form this. Now, Tiendo said that with the new moon, I guess that would be also a new moon, right? What the new moon promises, the full moon fulfills. So it might be by the fulfillment time that to start something that, it becomes totally obvious to those that have eyes to see. Everybody's not going to probably see what everybody sees. Some people see differently. And Tiendo taught that we could learn to see more of what's real. And that's see as understanding and in vision, literally. That we could see members of the next level if we raised our vibrations enough by adhering to all the behaviors and ways of members of the next level and trying to draw in their mind more and more by studying their materials and doing service for them, of telling other people about them. When the subject comes up, or stimulating, putting up one's shingle so that the subject can come up. I would use fake names if I did that. Well, I have used fake names. Because you don't really want interference from the lower forces. They will make themselves known, but the next level can keep a shield around us. We just can't assume it. So we need to do what we can to work around the negativity. Okay. See what happens right after that. The heavens depart as a scroll. That might be the removal of the New Jerusalem spacecraft that we can't see, but is physical. That is where souls and spirits are saved to when they're put on ice, or when even some could be working in that environment. That can be that spacecraft that's on top of the house that has physical members of the next level in it that can even be felt if the next level allowed people to feel them. Feeling meaning physically feel them. The way that Moses was able to feel Jehovah's side or thigh, wherever part of the body it was. I would think side makes more sense to me, or back even. It wasn't clear which part of the body it was in the Hebrew text. At that point, then every mountain and island moves out of their place because of that earthquake. or because of that soul scroll departing. Now, there could be a lot of time. There could be years in between these events. And the kings of the earth, and the great men, and the rich men, and the chief captains, and the mighty men, and every bondman, and every free man, hid themselves in the dens and in the rocks of the mountains. So that's what's happening now. That's where all the money's going. For the rich that are reserving space in their underground cities and ways to get there, and they're paying for it. So I would be very surprised if Trump didn't know about that and is feeling like he's doing the best service he can do for people to take money from every department of life. I think he's working on the labor unions now. And I don't, so that they can put it towards building more cubicles in underground cities and more transportation to those cities and underground tunneling. It's that agenda, and also getting off the planet, and also protecting against potential asteroid attacks that they think are coming from an advanced alien species that are no different from other alien species, just have better technology, but that's not the truth. Truth is what they're calling the advanced alien species are members of the next level that have evolved beyond the human equivalent, space aliens. And he said to the mountains and rocks, fall on us and hide us from the face of him that sitteth on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb. Well, the wrath of the Lamb and the face of the one that sitteth on the throne sound like T and Doe's faces to me. Or it could be just Doe's face, even his vehicle's face, that could in some way be on our minds. I don't think it would be a hologram, because I don't think the next level does that. Because they know the Luciferians do, according to T and Doe. They did the Fatima hologram, and Doe wouldn't be surprised if they tried to do like a Jesus hologram to please the Christians. And then they could pick up all the Christians with their spacecraft. Even make it look like, even take their vehicles. If they have the power to do that. I don't know if they do have the power to do that. Might take a lot of power from their spacecrafts, and they may need all the power they can get to keep them flying. So they may not, so the next level may be actually prohibiting them from doing that. Because after all, according to Jesus, the ones that came from the next level all returned with their vehicles. And so the next level wouldn't want to confuse humans by having the space aliens able to visually take humans into their spacecrafts by lifting them off the ground. That's my logic on that. I could be wrong about that. And it says, for the great wrath is come, and who shall be able to stand? So see, some people can still stand at this point. All right, well, with that said, I'm going to call it quits, I think. I'm going to go back to the chat room before I do. See if there's anything else on your all minds. And then consider that this topic was the sun. Good night, Jeff. Thank you for participating with me on this. Good night, folks. It's my pleasure. Hope we can do it again.